Geography, LMS Linguistic.
Live कर दो.
Okay, request to everyone, please mute your mic.
बंद कर दो. चलिए स्टार्ट करें.
तो उनके माइक में आवाज आ रहा है ईयरफोन में.
पूरी बात को कर रही है. पूरी बात को कर रही है. किसका है? सबसे बड़ा नहीं कर रही है. आप तो मोबाइल में पकड़ के कोई नहीं. आपको सबकी बात आपको पकड़.
सर यहाँ से है ना. एक सेकंड सर. इसका सब जो लैपटॉप सब इसका आवाज आ रहा है ना, ये जा रहा है सब शोर कंप्यूटर. इसका आवाज कम कर दो. जो आवाज
थोड़ा आवाज बंद कर दो. आवाज में धीरे कर दीजिए. तो वॉल्यूम धीरे कर लीजिए. जैसे कि आप सब म्यूट कर दीजिए. इसे सुन लीजिए. आगे आप वॉल्यूम को कम कर दीजिए. आगे सर ये चलाइए. ठीक है, एक ही चलेगा. आप इधर ही बंद कर. हाँ अपन म्यूट कर दीजिए. म्यूट है बिल्कुल. आवाज नहीं है. एक ही चलेगा. वो आवाज से इको करके उनके वजह आवाज. हाँ बस वीडियो ऑन रखिए.
Sorry for the little inconvenience caused. Okay, let's begin. I am Dr. Manuraj Sharma, Assistant Professor at University Department of Geography and Linguistics, Darbhanga. I am pleased to welcome our Honorable Vice Chancellor Sir, LMS Linguistics, Professor Surendra Pratap Singh Sir, Honorable Co-Vice Chancellor, Professor Olga Lapina, Honorable Registrar Sir, Professor Mushtaq Ahmed Sir, Honorable Dean, Faculty of Social Sciences, Professor G.R.P. Singh Sir, invited keynote speakers, Professor Rosie Cox, University of London, and Professor Rajiv Thakur, Missouri University, invited guest speakers, Dr. Olga Lapina, Russian Geographical Society, and Dr. Hossam Ismael, University, New Valley University, Egypt, and Honorable Dr. S.K. Sinha, Civil Surgeon, Darbhanga, distinguished participant, ladies and gentlemen, and my dear friends. This pandemic has magnified every existing inequality in our society, like systematic racism, gender inequality, and poverty. Now, these are the words said in an interview to The Guardian in 2020 by famous American philanthropist Melinda Gates while discussing the losses of development gains in the world's poorest countries. We humans have come a long way. We have truly been able to harness and in many cases override nature in many ways. It would indeed seem that we have the ultimate hold over nature. Scientists and public health experts around the world have been warning us for many years that a pandemic caused by an unknown virus was not a matter of if, but of when, and that we needed to prepare. And this misconception was overturned as we were struck with the wrathful power of nature in the form of COVID-19. No one expected that with a handful of reported cases in Wuhan, it would become a full-known pandemic of such a magnitude. Unlike SARS, this new coronavirus is highly transmissible and can remain airborne longer than thought. Although its lethality varies greatly across geographical settings and ages, it kills almost 1 out of every 100 infected people. With over 75 million confirmed cases and 1.7 million deaths across the world, there is no questioning its health impact. The corona pandemic has posed major challenges to people around the world and has had a huge impact on all areas of global economy. In the past editions of the Goalkeepers Report, we have celebrated decades of historic progress in fighting poverty and disease. But post-COVID, we have to confront the current reality with candor. This progress has now stopped. This pandemic has had a disproportionate impact on the racial and ethnic minority communities and the people living in extreme poverty. It has been a very big challenge for the traditional society in India, where every type of inequality, be it gender inequality, racial inequality, and income inequality, has been exposed and amplified during this pandemic. Both men and women are facing an increased burden of job losses. And with the subsidy cuts and rising unemployment as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic means that academic institutions across the globe must be worried as finances for the higher education is going to be the most significant challenge. This pandemic has taken a disproportionate toll on the underprivileged also. Not only they are highly exposed to the virus, but they are also more likely to get severely sick, as many do not have access to quality healthcare and have higher rates of chronic diseases. In addition, they have suffered the most from the economic and social consequences of lockdowns, like never before witnessed migration from different parts of the country to Bihar. And even vulnerable children who cannot follow online schooling. There was a rise in the domestic violence and even teenage pregnancies. Ultimately, it's a choice as a global community whether we face another lost decade or not. We know what it takes to maintain essential services during a crisis. We know a lot about the kind of inclusive policies needed to help people withstand the economic shock. There's so many challenges surrounding logistics, delayed deliveries of vaccines that slow down the country's inoculation efforts. And there is also the problem of vaccine hesitancy. In the words of our Honorable Prime Minister, Shri Narendra Modi ji, COVID-19 pandemic will remain a watershed moment in the history like World War II. The world will have to adapt to the post-corona scenario and be ready for the opportunities and challenges arising out of it. Humanity faces a crisis today in the form of COVID. Lord Buddha has become even more relevant. India has shown how we can face greatest of challenges by walking on his path. Countries are joining hands with each other and becoming each other's strength, taking the values of Buddha. The COVID-19 virus doesn't stop at borders. It is time now for the global cooperation and multilateral coordination. It is in this light that this international conference on the geographical perspectives on global coronavirus disease issues, challenges, and opportunities finds rationale. To enlighten us more on this, I would like to invite our head of department, Professor Santosh Kumar sir, for his formal welcome address and to introduce the theme of this international conference. Thank you. Over to you, Santosh sir.
Thank you very much, my younger brother and assistant professor, Dr. Sharma, working with me in the Department of Geography. Honorable Vice Chancellor, Lalit Narayan Mithila University, Surendra Pratap Singh, universally acclaimed for his administrative acumen as well as academic pursuits. Respected Pro Vice Chancellor, LNMU, Professor Dolly Sinha, who perpetually to go who had energized us. The registrar LNMU well known I authorities for giving your valuable time to join and address Further, I extend my heartfelt gratitude to our foreign speakers, particularly Dr. Rosie Cox, University of London, United Kingdom, Professor Rajiv Thakur, Missouri State University, USA, Dr. Olga Lapina, Dr. Hossam Ismael, New Valley University, Egypt. All of whom have given kind consent to address in Darbhanga, who is available for valedictory address. The focal theme of this international webinar happens to be geographical perspectives on coronavirus pandemic issues, challenges, and opportunities. The present health crisis has been compounded by economic, political, social, and cultural measures that have accelerated existing inequalities and disproportionately affected the most vulnerable segments of the society. Measures put in place to contain, delay, and mitigate the diffusion of diseases radically disrupted reconfiguring time and space. Geography address different aspects of application by the society. Why geography is a key part of fighting COVID-19 coronavirus outbreak, where it is stressed several geographical non-understanding the challenges and opportunities posed by the pandemic. It opens up a great scope for investigations by geographers into the emerging spaces of the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. The earliest map visualization of relationship between place and health was in 1694 on plague containment in Italy. Later on, the computerized geographical information system has made origin and detecting patterns of disease very fastly and very accurately. GIS is very useful because a fast infecting disease requires equally fast diagnosing genetic. Our environment, mobility, food production, migrations at various scales, economic slowdown, and such geographical phenomena may require further investigations, analysis, and studies. And in such a situation, I hope and trust that in this present international webinar, with such a contemporary focal theme, the distinguished international speakers offering keynote address as well as invited lectures will focus their deliberations and discussions on its core observation, analysis, and primary findings. I am also optimistic that their valuable suggestions would be very useful for the geographers in particular and the social scientists and thinkers in general. Once again, I myself and on behalf of the University Department of Geography, Lalit Narayan Mithila University, Darbhanga, a state of Bihar, a part of India, expresses my gratitude and wishes to you all, the participants in the present international seminar. Thank you all. Okay,
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Santosh, sir, for your introductory welcome address. And now, moving forward, we have the opening address of Professor GRP Singh, sir, but due to his sudden engagement, Professor GRP Singh couldn't join us with us today. However, he has conveyed his message and best wishes through a video message. So I request Shri Rahul ji to play his video message for our audience.
I, GRP Singh, Professor of Sociology, Head University Department of Sociology, and Dean, Faculty of Social Science at LM Mithila University, Darbhanga, Bihar, India, feel pleasure to welcome all of you to this international webinar organized by the University Department of Geography regarding geographical perspectives on global coronavirus pandemic issues, challenges, and opportunities. I hereby welcome a great academician, Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Surendra Pratap Singh sir, a social physics scientist, Honorable Pro Vice Chancellor, Professor Dolly Sinha ma'am, a famous literature, Registrar Professor Mustaq Ahmad sir. It is my pleasure to welcome today's guest speakers, Professor Rajiv Thakur, Missouri State University, USA, Professor Rosie Cox, University of London, United Kingdom, Dr. Olga Lapina, Russian Geographical Society, Russia. Dr. Hossam Ismael, New Valley University, Egypt. For such an academic occasion, I heartily thank Decent Head, University Department of Geography, Dr. Santosh Kumar, convener of this webinar, great geographer, Dr. Anuranjan, co-convener of this webinar, Saint of the Department, Dr. Manuraj Sharma, and Pride of Department, Dr. Gaurav Sikka, Organizing Secretary of this webinar. I hope participants will enjoy this academic event. Thank you all for your time. Namaste.
Okay, we thank Professor G.R.P. Singh sir for his opening remarks and address to this international conference. Now I request our head of department, Professor Santosh Kumar sir, to formally welcome the academic lighthouse of our university, Pro-Vice Chancellor, Professor Dolly Sinha ma'am, and a great academician and registrar of the university, Dolly Sinha. Over to you, Santosh sir.
Thank you. Now I request our Pro-Vice Chancellor, Professor Dolly Sinha, ma'am, to address this international webinar and to give message to our national as well as international speakers and participants. Over to Pro VC, ma'am.
Namaskar. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Namaskar and very good morning to all of you. Professor S.P. Singh, Honorable Vice Chancellor of Mithila University and the Chief Patron of the conference. Professor G.R.P. Singh, Dean, Faculty of Social Sciences, Mithila University. Professor Santosh Kumar, Head, Department of Geography and President of the conference. Professor Mustaq Ahmad, Registrar of the University and co-patron, delegates, participants, faculty members of Geography Department and various colleges of the university, all members of the organizing committee, Dr. Anuranjan, the co-convener, Dr. Manuraj Sharma, the organizing secretary, and Dr. Gaurav Sikka, co-organizing secretary, representative of press and electronic media, other distinguished academicians and personalities in the audience, ladies and gentlemen, and my dear students. I'm very happy to find that the Department of Geography, Mithila University, is organizing an international webinar on geographical perspectives on coronavirus pandemic issues, challenges, and opportunities. The topic of the seminar is needless to mention that is very pertinent. I am delighted to find out the distinguished personalities and researchers as speakers and resource persons. We are fortunate to have with us Professor Rosie Cox, University of London, UK, who will be delivering the keynote address. Professor Rajiv Thakur of Missouri State University, USA, Dr. Hossam Ismael, New Valley University, Egypt, Dr. Olga Lapina, Russian Geographical Society, Russia, and many researchers from academia as well as industry from different parts of the globe. I am grateful to all the resource persons, including the keynote speaker, Professor Cox, for sharing their valuable time with us to share their knowledge with us. I am confident that the deliberations during the seminar would be of very high level. On behalf of the university and on my personal note, I once again extend my greetings to all of you and welcome you all. The credit of organizing the conference of this level goes to Professor Santosh Kumar, Head Department of Geography, and his team of young faculty members, research scholars, and postgraduate students. I appreciate their effort wholeheartedly. I am very sure that the participants, teachers, PhD scholars, and postgraduate students would be hugely benefited and academically enriched by the high quality lectures and deliberations which will be delivered during the course of this webinar. A substantial amount of studies in different places around the world has already tried to examine if there are any correlation between COVID-19 outbreak and the existing weather or climatic conditions. The prevailing meteorology dependent on temperature, humidity, wind speed, etc., significantly alters the environmental stability. Therefore, it might affect the sustainability of the viruses and the transmission process. Some scientists from China claimed that the COVID-19 transmission is significantly affected by surrounding air temperature and humidity conditions. Subsequently, considering the global context, transmission is found higher in particular regions of subtropical countries where the surrounding air temperature is significantly low during the first phase of COVID-19 pandemic. They reported a positive association with mortality rate also and daily temperature in Wuhan, China. However, not many scientists approve of such behavior based on data collected at other parts of the globe during the second phase. Therefore, it needs extensive research. And I'm happy that the Department of Geography of our university has chosen this topic to organize an international webinar where experts will be throwing light on all aspects of the pandemic, particularly related to geography. How pandemic has affected the global population and challenges faced in social and every sector of human activities we know are affected due to COVID-19 and all the health, the social welfare, the economic well-being of individuals, families, and populations, migration of laborers, and self-employed persons, migrations of self-employed persons, whether we have to examine whether there is a reverse trend in migration now or not, the adverse effects on agriculture, economy, health, education, job opportunities, all these needs immediate attention and needs to be researched exhaustively. Also, subsequently, many opportunities are created in business, commerce, and service sectors through digital platforms. Opportunities are also created in digital education sector and also in health services. So all these things need extensive research, and I hope during the course of the webinar, the experts will be throwing light on these aspects and will enrich us. I look forward to listen to them. Thank you. Namaskar.
Thank you, ma'am, for a wonderful speech. Ma'am has really highlighted an important point and correlated the COVID-19 with the climatic conditions that we as geographers are finding on an international platform, where we see variables like temperature and humidity is highly affecting the Spain. Thank you, ma'am. We request Honorable Sir, if he's there, to address our August audience. Registrars.
On focal theme, geographical perspective on global coronavirus pandemic, issues, challenges and opportunities. The impact of COVID-19 has been massive and unprecedented, affecting everybody of land, every aspect of land, people and economy both. It revealed that not only developing nations like India suffered due to poor health system, even well-funded health system of developed nations failed. Complacency and lack of leadership caused serious damage to both society and economy. With extended lockdown, people were forced to migrate across the nation. With no state support, were left stranded on road. The stark socio-spatial inequalities have been exacerbated by the pandemic situation and associated restrictions. This global economic crisis is unique and it has been triggered by a non-economic pattern. The effect of COVID-19 have been pervasive and is expected to affect size, composition and distribution of population in India due to disruption of demographic behavior. Geography as a special science addresses different aspects of this pandemic. This opens up a great scope for investigation by the geographers into the emerging space of the effect of the COVID-19 pandemic. With the accelerated pace of technological advances and growing divide on political and policy options, a better understanding of disruptive global events such as COVID-19 with spatial and temporal perspective of an imperative and will make the ultimate difference in public health and economic decision making. I heartily welcome the esteemed speaker, Professor Rosie Cox, University of London, Professor Rajiv Thakur, Missouri State University, Dr. Olga Lapina, Russia Geographical Society, Dr. Hossam Ismael, New Valley University, Egypt, to contribute their ideas in this discussion. I congratulate departments of geography for taking this initiative for an open discussion on issues, challenges and opportunities with respect to the corona pandemic. The faculty member of the department are very much dedicated, committed and active to organize seminar and symposia regularly. My good wishes to all of you.
And we have end of our inaugural session, and we thank our Vice Chancellor Sir for his best wishes and warm message for the department. And we also thank our Honorable Pro Vice Chancellor Dolly Sinha Ma'am for valuable time for this conference. So moving ahead, I think and we believe that by participating in this conference, we are in the right place and at the right time. So let's together accelerate the flow of ideas and the scaling of good practices. So with this, I request Gaurav sir to begin the next technical session that will begin in next 5 minutes. Over to you, Gaurav sir.
Thank you, Dr. Manuraj Sharma ji. So, with 5 minutes of break, we will be beginning our technical session, in which first keynote address will be delivered by Professor Rosie Cox. Then the special keynote lecture by Professor Rajiv Thakur. And we have 2 invited lectures by Dr. Olga Lapina and Dr. Hossam Ismael, which will be followed by the valedictory address. So we will start a technical session within 5 minutes. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So we are resuming with our technical session of today's international webinar. I welcome all of you again to this international webinar with a focal theme on geographical perspectives on global coronavirus pandemic issues, challenges, and opportunities. I could see the senior faculty members, senior geographers, Professor Dhaneshwar Prasad Singh, Shardanand sir, Vinaynath Jha sir, Shiv Kumar Sahu sir, I welcome all of you, sir, to this international webinar organized by University Department of Geography. I would like to also welcome senior professors joining us from different universities, from US, from UK, and other nations who are joining this international webinar. First keynote address will be delivered by Professor Rosie Cox. Rosie Cox is a professor of geography at University of London and Deputy Dean for the School of Social Sciences, History and Philosophy at the University of London. Her research focuses on home and particularly paid work within the home, and she has published widely in this area, including on paid domestic workers, gendered migration, and alternative food networks. She is currently the chair of the Gender and Feminist Geography Research Group, GFGRG, of the Royal Geographical Society. And I am also associated with this research group of the Royal Geographical Society London as a member on the executive committee from 2019 to 2021. And she is chairing this research group. The Queen of London is the patron of this research group of Royal Geographical Society. Professor Rosie Cox is also the editor of the journal Geo, Geography and Environment, and she's also the co-editor of the Routledge book series Home. She, due to the different time zone, she has sent us a video lecture, and now I would like to request our IT expert Rahul ji to please show her video. Kalidas ji, please mute yourself. Kalidas sir, please mute yourself.
Hello, and thank you so much for inviting me to the webinar. I'm so sorry that I can't be with you synchronously, as we now say, rather than in person, as we used to say in pre-COVID times. Thank you so much for this invitation. I'm going to be talking today from my role as chair of the Gender and Feminist Geographies Research Group of the Royal Geographical Society. And I want to say a little bit about a small initiative the group has been involved in during COVID. I'm going to begin by telling you a small amount about the group and then about the statements that we've written during COVID in order to try and make sense of the gendered inequalities that we've been seeing. So the GFGRG, as we are somehow called, the Gender and Feminist Geographies Research Group, is a research group of the Royal Geographical Society. And overall, we aim to encourage a study of the geographical implications of gender differentiation and inequalities in society. And we also encourage work from a feminist perspective. We also do work to try and have practical effects based on our research. So we work with the Royal Geographical Society to reach out to academic departments within the UK to raise issues about gender inequalities. And we also work with other groups internationally to build links and spread this work of gender and geography further afield. In May 2020, we produced a statement called COVID is a Feminist Issue. And this came out of general desire on the part of the committee members of the GFGRG to make sense of what we were seeing around us and also to intervene in debates. When the pandemic struck in early 2020, we soon saw that the effects of the virus were not equal. But in the UK at least, we kept being told that the virus was a great equaliser. People wanted to understand what they were seeing. This was a shocking experience, a great change in most of our lives. The first wave hit the UK very hard, which is where most of us are based. So we went from living very ordinary lives, thinking that we knew what the future held, into lockdown and very high rates of death within a short amount of time. What we did to make sense of this and to intervene in these debates was to come together to produce a statement that was put on our website and republished by the Royal Geographical Society as a blog called COVID is a Feminist Issue. We wanted to make links between our experiences as academics and as individuals and what was happening around the world. The key points that we made from that first statement was that COVID very definitely was not an equaliser, and we brought together data on the unequal death rates by gender. It was affecting men, in fact, much worse than women in terms of death rates in the UK, by race and ethnicity, by ability and disability. Disabled people were particularly badly affected, and really crucially by levels of deprivation. It was really important also for us to outline the fact that people's ability to adjust to the pandemic was unequal. And this was very definitely divided by gender, by income, by race, ethnicity, and by things like mental health. Women were particularly affected by the fact that they had responsibility for childcare, and lockdowns often meant that children weren't at school but needed to be homeschooled and looked after for many hours a day. In Britain at least, women were much more likely to be employed in jobs which couldn't be done, and so they were left without work, or they were doing work which was frontline in the care sector as nurses or as carers. So women were very badly affected in terms of their work experience. They either increased their amount of work and the danger that was presented by going to work, or they lost work, or they couldn't work because of childcare responsibilities. The same was true for people from minority ethnic groups. They were much more likely to be involved in work that put them in danger, and they had much higher rates of COVID infection. Mental health was also a divider. People already suffering from depression and anxiety were much less able to cope with the new demands of lockdown and the separation, the isolation that this brought for many. We've also seen around the world that COVID and the lockdowns associated with it have made many other gendered problems worse. Domestic violence has increased in every country. I know that India was described as the most dangerous country in the world for women, and this is something that has only been made worse by people not being able to move about in their normal and commonly accepted ways. There were also points that we wanted to highlight about the way that COVID affected us as academics. The turbulence that the pandemic has brought meant that lots of less secure jobs within academia have been cut. There were threats of job losses as well as job losses. Hours have been cut for precarious staff, and funding for PhD students, fieldwork in particular, has all been cut. This has meant that people who with very secure academic jobs are now more differentiated from those earlier in their careers. As I mentioned before, women have been particularly affected during lockdowns by their responsibility for childcare, and academic women are not immune to this. Studies have found that women have been particularly affected by their responsibility for childcare by not being able to put in the long hours of work that continual publishing demands. This has affected the rates at which women have been submitting journal articles and applications for funding. And in the long term, this will have effects on academic careers and things like promotion. Women are going to be less likely to attain secure academic jobs and less likely to be promoted once they are in them. Students have also been unequally affected by the move to online teaching. We've seen a digital divide where those students who have access to good internet, good computers, a space to work, have been able to carry on with their studies less affected by the lockdowns and the move to online teaching. Students who have any care responsibilities are more adversely affected, as are those who don't have the best IT equipment or the space in which to study in peace. So that was our position in March 2020, and it feels really like a lifetime ago. We published our statement in May 2020, and in May 2021, we regrouped as a committee to revisit what we had said a year previously and to discuss what we thought about the ongoing situation. And you won't be surprised to hear, COVID is still a feminist issue a year after our original statement and now 18 months after it. We saw that our worst fears for the pandemic had been realised. The scale of illness and loss of life was absolutely terrible, and the unequal effects had continued. But there have been new issues too. As vaccines have been developed and rolled out across the world, access to vaccines has become a new axis of inequality, with some people in the richest countries of the world rapidly getting double doses of vaccination, whilst others elsewhere cannot access even a first dose, even if they are in a group which is most vulnerable. The long periods of lockdown have really brought childcare to the fore. What was an inkling in May 2020 about the possible effects of long lockdowns became a reality a year later, when we had been in and out of lockdown, with children being at home, at school, a number of times. The effects of this on family life are of course profound, and the effects on women have been much harder than on men. The effects have also been very hard on children who have lost their social networks, as well as many, many hours of learning. And we have seen our prediction of academic careers being affected unequally also come true. Surprisingly, perhaps, the period of lockdown has been a time of boom in academic publishing. Many journals have found that they have many more papers submitted to them than during a normal year. But the rate at which men and women are submitting papers unequally has increased. Men have found this a period in which they've been able to be more productive on average, and women have found it a period where putting in the hours needed to maintain an academic career has been extremely hard. This has been hardest for people at the beginning of their careers, both because they're most likely to have the youngest children and because they're least likely to have flexibility in their work to be able to put things off. PhD students have been very badly affected, with many unable to carry out their work plans and not having extensions in funding that they need in order to make alternative arrangements. But the news isn't all bad. We have seen that the pandemic has created new inequalities and exacerbated many that already existed at every scale, from the global to the very personal. It has highlighted the fragility of our ways of life, of our planet, of our relationship to our planet, and it has shown our very deep interconnections. But you know, as a group, the committee of the Gender and Feminist Geographies Research Group did find solace by coming together to make a public statement. We were proud of what we wrote, and we really enjoyed the process of talking together and working together and hearing about each other's experiences, feeling less isolated as feminist geographers, and understanding our own experiences within this wider context. The terrible pandemic actually increased our solidarity and our feelings of belonging. And I would finish by saying that geographers have a really key role to play in making connections between the effects of COVID and the other inequalities and crises that we're facing. Most obviously, of course, the climate crisis. We can build other solidarities, and perhaps ultimately some good will be able to come from this terrible pandemic. Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to me today, and I hope you have a really excellent webinar. Goodbye.
On the behalf of the University Department of Geography, I am thankful towards Professor Rosie Cox, who has spared her valuable time and recorded this very intriguing, very interesting lecture for all of us. And where she has, I would like to reiterate her last point, where she calls upon the geographers who can play a very pivotal role in connecting the COVID-19 pandemic with the associated crises, the inequalities of the post-pandemic period, and how she has brought to the fore the differential impacts of this pandemic on men and women, and the role geographers, particularly the human, social, feminist geographers, can play in this context. So I thank Professor Rosie Cox for delivering her lecture on COVID-19, feminist issue. I would like to inform all the participants that more than 100 participants are connected to this webinar. We are also YouTube live right now, and around 70 participants have logged in through the Google Meet link, and around 20 to 30 participants are listening this lecture at the YouTube link. I welcome my friend Hossam Ismael from Egypt. Welcome, Hossam. So the next, taking the program further, the keynote lecture. I would like to welcome Professor Rajiv Thakur, sir, for the keynote lecture. Rajiv Thakur is Associate Professor of Geography at Missouri State University, United States of America. Before joining Missouri State University, he has taught at University of Tennessee, University of South Alabama, Indiana State University, University of Akron, and the Ohio State University. His research interests are geography of research and development, human dimensions of global climate change, urban and regional economic development, higher education, strategic planning, and management. He is also coming out with a recent book on resource management, sustainable development, and governance, Indian and international perspective, and a chapter of mine is being selected as a book chapter in this upcoming book with Springer, UK. I welcome you, sir. Rajiv Thakur, sir, is the pride of Mithila. His origins are in this region, and from here he has made a long journey till United States as a professor of geography. He has published widely on India as well as on international themes, and he is also associated with our department in coming time through an evolving research interest. I welcome you, sir. Professor Rajiv Thakur's title of talk is Integrating Ecosystem, Knowledge Economy and Livelihood in Changing Mithila Landscape, Issues, Responses and Strategies. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Thakur. Let me first of all try and get access to sharing my PowerPoint. Can I have the technical support? Can you see my
share your
PowerPoint?
screen.
Can you all see my screen?
No, it's not shared right now.
Okay, so I will have to be given the access.
Deepak, please give access to Rajiv Thakur, sir. Deepak.
You go through directly because there I share
Yes, sir.
my
You can share your screen directly. It's
Okay.
yeah. Those who are operating, please go through share screen.
Can you see my screen?
not yet, sir. Not yet.
Okay, just a second.
Or you can mail it to me. I can share it from my end, maybe.
Okay, let's do that
Yes.
quickly. Dr. Sikka, I've just sent it to you.
Okay, sir. Just a minute. I'm. You have sent on the Gmail. gauravsikka@gmail.com.
Yes, let me see. Gaurav Sikka. Yeah, so you want me to send it on the Gmail?
Yes, sir. Gmail.
Okay. Okay, sent it again.
Yes, sir. Just a minute. I've received your email. Yes, sir. Now your
Dr. Sikka,
presentation is
screen?
visible.
Can you make it full screen?
मेरे तरफ से कर दिया. Actually, it's full screen mode at my end.
Okay.
We are trying to, sort out the issue. Wait just a minute, else we will start with this mode.
Thank you, Dr. Sikka. I can see that the presentation is full screen. I'm afraid there was a little bit of a technical glitch, but Dr. Sikka and his team has managed to sort that out. Thank you so much once again. I wanted to go ahead and start by thanking the entire Lalit Narayan Mithila University, the administration, members of the organizing committee of the Department of Geography, past and present faculty members, research students, students at large at the university, those guests, distinguished guests who have joined us, my fellow speakers, Dr. Rosie Cox, speakers from Egypt and Russia. It's a singular honor to be able to share my thoughts during this international webinar on the pandemic. Luckily and interestingly, I've just come back from a brief trip from the Mithila region, where I spent a few days traveling in Darbhanga, Madhubani, and also visited Patna. So I have some very fresh perspectives. But before I carry on, I quickly wanted to touch and connect with what Professor Cox had to say and share with us with regard to the pandemic. So I think some of the points that she has pointed out, some of the thoughts that she had shared about the pandemic and how it has impacted, and there's a gendered impact, it's very true. Men and women don't get affected by pandemic in the same sense and in the same manner. So what I thought was interesting is that the pandemic has essentially created a sense of equalizing, that it has brought the rest of the world to the same sense of impact. The vulnerabilities are nearly the same, some low, some high, but the impact and the vulnerabilities are there. The issue of digital divide, which has come to the rescue of some people in advanced capitalist countries and Western economies, that's true. But in more peripheral regions of the world, including in India, in the US, in Europe, and elsewhere, people feel left behind. Can everybody hear me? Dr. Sikka, can everybody hear me?
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Thank you. So, and then the issue of accessibility to resources, whether it's digital resources or any number of other such resources, are also a point of contention. In all of this, when I began thinking about what I wanted to share with you, I was reminded that as geographers, we are concerned with the idea of interdependence, interconnections, and interactions. And all of that really affects people. And my focus in talking around the pandemic, and also not just a pandemic, but a major pivotal process that we are all experiencing, is climate change. So between climate change on the one hand and the pandemic on the other, our landscape is constantly changing. And there is nothing that our generation has experienced that has prepared us to face this pandemic or the climate change, but both of them are constantly changing the landscape around us. So with that, let me take you, Dr. Sikka, let's get on to the next slide. What I wanted to focus was the idea of ecosystem. We're all familiar with the word, geographers, and across the board, people from other disciplines are also using this word, ecosystem. Very simply, ecosystem is a place where there are many different interacting units, both living and non-living, creating a sense of energy and creating certain products and services that they all can use. But that's sort of a very simplistic understanding of what ecosystem is. I also wanted to share with you that it is in this ecosystem that we live, and for Mithila, and the landscape around Mithila, or in which Mithila finds itself, there is also, the economy that operates. There's also people's livelihood that we have to pay attention to. And in my opinion, the pandemic is not something which is so unusual. Some or the other form of environmental distraction has always happened, whether they are man-made or whether they are natural. We are yet to come to such a conclusion whether this particular pandemic is artificial, in other words, artificially generated, or is it something which was created by nature? One way or the other, we have to contend with its impact. And in my understanding, and I believe in the understanding of many other geographers, social scientists, environmental scientists, the idea is to understand that pandemic is part of the ecosystem, and both are getting affected and influenced by what is known as climate change. And it is in this context that I want to advance some thoughts, some observations. And so, Dr. Sikka, let's move to the next slide. I decided to focus on Mithila, A, because I belong to the region. I have some sense of an understanding. And as I focus my research interest at the interface of economics and environment, I wanted to also, from a geographical perspective, focus my interest on Mithila itself. As you're looking at the map of Mithila on the slide, I'm pretty sure that some in the audience must be wondering that if this is a true map of Mithila, and so is my own concern as a geographer, as a social scientist. I am aware that the notion of Mithila is a very, very cultural notion. But I feel very strongly about this cultural region. And I'm also aware that there is a core in Mithila and there is a periphery in Mithila. You move away from Madhubani, Darbhanga, and northern Samastipur, east or west, and you begin to realize that the cultural part of Mithila begins to diminish, begins to wane, begins to reduce its own characteristics. But that apart, at least if you try and search and investigate, what is Mithila administratively? And this is the kind of map that comes as an output, as an outcome. Of course, in reality, if you travel to Sahibganj, or if you go to Dumka or Banka or Jamui, you don't hear people speaking truly Maithili in that sense of the term. But that's the cultural dimension. And for a moment, I will keep it aside, but I wanted to give you all of this as part of, our own understanding. You all live in this landscape, you understand it better, and that is why I titled or subtitled it as Revisiting rather than as My Understanding. Dr. Sikka, let's move to the next one. I wanted to focus, and I want to grab your attention and show you this map, which again, I'm pretty sure that you're familiar with. And the map shows that when you are looking at the North Bihar plain, much of which overlaps with Mithila as a landscape, this landscape is essentially an ecosystem which we can call a riverine ecosystem. Between the western fringe of North Bihar plain and the eastern part of North Bihar plain, ending in the district of Kishanganj or Katihar or Purnia, literally there are at least more than a dozen rivers and several other smaller minor ones, all emerging from the Himalayas, from Tibet, going down through Nepal into North Bihar plains. And year after year, we are all victims of the scourge of these rivers. Somehow, we've lived with this ecosystem. Flooding is part of it, but flood is not the only issue. But we are all familiar. As residents of this landscape, we are all familiar with what flood does and how it disrupts our lifestyle, our socioeconomics, our economy, and of course, our livelihood. And the question that comes to me again and again, or the issue that reminds me again and again, what can we do in such an ecosystem? How can we survive? How can we move forward with life? And there are only two ideas that comes to my mind. In the realm, under the impact of climate change, there are only two ideas. One, mitigation, and the other, adaptation. I repeat, mitigation and adaptation. Mitigation is something that we normally do in the early part when an ecosystem begins to create challenges. But with a very sufficiently advanced ecosystem, as in a riverine flood-based ecosystem that we find ourselves in the middle of, we're not left with much choice but to begin adapting. And the literature, not just by geographers, but by social scientists and environmental scientists, is full of ideas around the notion of adaptive management strategies. Dr. Sikka, next slide. To reinforce this idea of a riverine ecosystem, if you take a close and careful look at the North Bihar Plain, literally there is less land available than there are rivers, whether major ones or minor ones, all the way from Gandak to Mahananda on the eastern side. In my recent visit, I had the opportunity, with the help of two wonderful geographers, Professor Dhaneshwar Prasad Singh and Dr. Sikka himself, I had the opportunity to travel and see very closely what's happening to the landscape. But let me assure you that flooding and flood is not the only concern or challenge of Mithila's landscape. Dr. Sikka, let's move to the next one. It's important that we understand the geology of this region also. And it is here that I want to remind all my fellow geographers that moving from the north to the south, the geology of this region is moving from a soft landscape to a hard landscape. In other words, you have an alluvial floodplain in the north, and as you move towards the brown color, which is the Dharwad rocks or the Vindhyan rocks, you're moving towards a geology which is far more stronger, one in which, of course, you find minerals as you go into the Jharkhand region. But as you move up north, let's not forget the creation of the Himalayas and the story of how Gondwana land and Angara land got separated with the Titha Sea, and that this region has been created, and the geology and its formations have been a product of millions and millions of years. And we humans are a very small part of this entire period of creation. In other words, it's nature which is stronger than us humans in this part of the world. Dr. Sikka, let's move to the next slide. I have been repeatedly talking about the fact that flood is not the only issue in this ecosystem. The fact that we have a young mountain chain north of us called the Himalayas, which is constantly raising itself. I believe literature tells us that almost at the rate of 1 inch every year, approximately 8,848 meters above sea level is what we know the Himalayan highest points to be. This region is very much on a fault line, and particularly the northern parts of the North Bihar floodplain is not just part of the floodplain, it's not just part of the riverine ecosystem, but it's also part of an earthquake zone. So our problems in this region is not just compounded by river ecology, but also by an earthquake ecosystem or earthquake ecology. And you may think that, okay, flooding was one, earthquake is the second one. Can our problems end right here? And I am sorry to inform you that our problems don't end right here. Dr. Sikka, let's move to the next slide. We also have something called the cyclonic weather system coming from the Bay of Bengal that also hits us frequently, almost on an annual basis. Even though these cyclones don't hit us so strongly as perhaps earthquake and of course flood, but it is also another challenge that is there for us to contend with on an annual basis. And if you notice, as far as the cyclone is concerned, it is pretty much something which impacts the entire northern North Bihar plain. So the ecosystem is full of challenges. Dr. Sikka, let's move to the next one. All of this, as we sort of put together to understand what the ecosystem is doing in the region, I want to point out some issues. Next slide, please. The picture on that slide that you just saw was essentially an aerial view taken when I arrived in Darbhanga about 3 weeks ago, and had the opportunity to take a shot of the Bagmati River and what it was doing as it was flooded. Of course, many in Darbhanga were not influenced by the flood, but some were. But at this point, I want to point out what are some of the issues before us, and I'm just moving my discussion a little bit from the ecosystem itself and the ecology and the environment and the landscape to one which is moving towards economy and livelihood. Given such a landscape that we find ourselves, and by the way, riverine ecology, riverine ecosystems are not typical to Mithila. Such ecosystems are found in other parts of the world, including in North America and Europe, in much of Africa, in Latin America, in Southeast Asia. So it's not very, very uniquely, typically Mithila, it's found in other parts of the world. And one of the most interesting things in my understanding is that we are locked up in the Mithila landscape in what is called a resource-based economy, as opposed to a knowledge-based economy. And I would quickly take the next few minutes to clarify and deconstruct what it means when I say that our landscape in Mithila is essentially resource-based. In other words, we in Mithila are largely dealing with an economy, or we are part of an economy where there's a larger segment, a larger proportion of the dependence is on primary sector, resource-based, as opposed to what's happening in many other developed parts of the world, where as economies grow, they're moving in the direction of from agricultural to industrial to knowledge-based. Now, this is also influenced by many other factors. We live we at least have chosen to move away from what is known as a welfare system in India to what is known as a workfare system. And the classic distinction between welfare and workfare is that we are gradually moving towards a market economy. Even if whether we wanted it or we did not want it, we are engulfed by the processes and the influences of what a market society will do. But continuing with this discussion, let me move to the next slide, Dr. Sikka. So what should be our response and what should be our strategy as we try to contend with this huge gap between a resource-based economy where there's excessive dependence upon agriculture or similar other primary sector occupation, as opposed to an industrial or a knowledge-based economy. Next slide, Dr. Sikka. I want to quickly, using these pyramids, I want to distinguish and I also want to deconstruct and explain that every economy in the world is primarily situated in a place where people's participation, the workforce in that economy, the demographics in that system has moved from primary sector, a larger participation in the primary sector, to moving towards manufacturing and tertiary. Typically, in any developing society, as ours, as Mithila, in a sense, we can also consider, and this may be highly debatable, but Mithila's landscape is still locked up, not just in a resource-based economy, but also in some sort of a semi-feudal ways of living, which we haven't gotten out of. Even though, if you look at these statistics, of the government of Bihar, the Department of Planning and Statistics, almost 20 to 25% of the entire state GDP comes from primary sector and agriculture primarily. Only about 5% comes from industry. And surprisingly, 70% comes from the tertiary sector, which means a wide variety of services. It can be teaching, it can be medical, it can be information technology, it can be banking, finance. But it's very surprising because in my travels and in my understanding of the literature, and I'm pretty sure that some of you may agree, some of you may disagree, I have a hard time finding where exactly are all these people, the population of Bihar, residing in terms of the tertiary sector. And if they are, where exactly are they working? Outside the university, outside the school system, outside government jobs? But we'll come to that in a few minutes. There is also on the other side the inverted pyramid, where the base is now narrow, and the top, which should be the base actually, in a knowledge-based economy is one where primary sector, which includes agriculture, fishing, mining, anything that is resource-based, the participation of that sector in a knowledge-based economy gets very reduced. More and more people in the workforce begin to move away, and they are barely 5%. If you look at North America, US, Canada, barely 5% of the 340 million US and Canada's population is working in the primary sector. On the other hand, about 20% of that population is in the manufacturing, and the rest, literally more than 70%, is in the tertiary sector. And out of that tertiary sector, a significant number works in the quaternary sector, and I will explain what is quaternary sector. Quaternary sector is that sector where people are essentially engaged in the true sense, in knowledge-based economy, where a lot of the things that are being done is governed by the idea of flexibility, is governed by the idea of information technology infrastructure, is governed by the idea of interdisciplinarity. So, in real terms, what it means is all our software designers, software technicians are part of this quaternary sector. All our biotechnologists, people who work in the realm of research and development, as you may have heard, people who work in Bangalore, in Hyderabad, in Chennai, in the IT infrastructure, or similar folks working in the US, in the Silicon Valley. This quaternary sector is also sometimes referred to as producer service providers. In other words, what the quaternary sector produces is not for the direct consumption of the rest of the society, but they are producing certain kinds of process or products which will be consumed by others in the tertiary sector for the most part. They can produce products and processes for the manufacturing in the primary sector too. But there's another word which is very important in this entire pyramidical understanding of our economy, and that is value addition. It's a very important idea that I wish to put some stress on. And in the context of Mithila also, we have to ask ourselves the question that if we are going to be dependent for our livelihood on what we produce And if we continue to be dependent on resource-based economy, direct farming, fishing, similar other activities, how much revenue can we generate from that? And how can that revenue truly allow us to push our GDP up? Now, we can pat our backs and we can be happy by congratulating ourselves that Bihar's GDP in the last couple of years has been at 17% and approximately in that range. Double-digit growth rate sounds very good. But in reality, is that true development? Is that development that will sustain itself? Because outside of this knowledge-based economy that I am sort of espousing, I'm also worried about, as we move forward, is our economy, as it evolves in North Bihar and perhaps the whole of Mithila landscape, is it going to be sustainable? Is it going to be green? Because those are going to be the indicators and those are going to be the criteria by which the future generation is going to examine us and investigate us. And we have to stand well and good on those lines. Hopefully, if there are questions associated with these pyramids, I will be happy to answer. But Dr. Sikka, let's move to the next slide. Even as I'm talking about knowledge economy, I want to emphasize three things: the idea of interconnection, the idea of interdependence, and of course, interaction. In other words, what happens within a knowledge economy landscape in Mithila or potentially in North Bihar Plain area is not something that can be tight-knit and can be locked up within this region. It has to have interactions, will have interactions with the rest of the world, with the rest of the country. I'm glad to see from many reports of the government of Bihar that there is a focus, there is an energy that is moving in the direction of understanding the significance of knowledge economy. In fact, the creation of the Aryabhat Knowledge University is part of that process. The idea of having an airport in Darbhanga that none of us could have ever imagined 25 years ago or even 20 years ago is an awesome development that is going to take the region forward. And in all of this, I think somewhere there is a vision, and it may be a little slow for us to achieve those visions, but the idea is to understand the dynamics of knowledge economy, what it requires. Knowledge economy demands connectivity, not just connectivity between individuals, but connectivity through infrastructure. Knowledge economy demands a skill set of a very different kind. Knowledge economy demands that we shift, as I just spoke in terms of the pyramid, that as a society, we understand the importance of moving away. And it doesn't mean that we give up on agriculture or we stop doing farming. What it means is that if as a society we have to do well and we have to do better, we have to understand where the value addition is going to be maximum. After all, there is a reason why our students come to the university, whether at the undergraduate level, at the graduate level, or at the research level. The reason why students come to a university is to gain value addition. The skills that they will acquire will allow them to sell their skills in a marketplace. And the marketplace is constantly changing. Today's marketplace is not about learning one skill at one point in time and hoping that you will be able to survive for the rest of your life with that one skill. And that's an idea that comes from the notion of flexibility. Knowledge economy is all about flexibility, innovation, and constant innovation, constant change in technology. The smartphones that we use, for a number of us, it's only about 5 years or maybe 7 or 8 years. Much before the smartphone, there used to be things like what is called, a candy phone or, a ring hello phone. What changed? Technology is changing. The laptop, the computers that we are using today used to be of a different version. Now they're outdated. And we realize that whether it is a computer application, whether it is an operating system, a lot of these things that we have now become so dependent upon are constantly changing. And notice that I'm emphasizing on the idea of information technology infrastructure. Mithila is not uniquely underdeveloped. such underdeveloped regions are in other parts of the world too. Let's move to the next slide, Dr. Sikka. And as I refer to the idea of underdeveloped regions in other parts of the world, I'm particularly reminded of where I live. For the last 20 years, I've been in the United States, and one of the states in the US is famous by the name of West Virginia, which is no different than our own Jharkhand. Very rich in minerals, but of course we've stopped excavating minerals over there. We're no longer doing that. But the state of West Virginia has moved in the direction of what is called knowledge economy. In other words, it's now exploring the idea of what knowledge economy as a direction has to offer to its population. Knowledge economy is what happened in Valley. Knowledge economy is what happened to Bangalore, to Hyderabad, to Chennai, and to their IT information technology hubs. For the kind of landscape that Mithila has and that we find ourselves locked up in, it is going to be extremely challenging to find industries to survive for the obvious vulnerability that will be created by recurring floods, recurring cyclones, and of course, earthquakes. When you have so many challenges that nature poses, it doesn't mean that we give up. It simply means that we have to learn to figure out new ways of adaptation. And one of the adaptation that we will have to think strongly about is to consider the broader umbrella understanding of what knowledge economy can offer. And of course, information technology, biotechnology, the whole gamut of research and development is an open field. It's an area that basically falls within the broader area of the tertiary sector or the service sector, and of course, within that, the quaternary sector. So, as I move forward, I'm thinking that members of the administration at Lalit, Narayan, Mithila University and similar other universities in North Bihar and in the Mithila landscape will have to move forward, will have to rethink, will have to revisit the idea of what is it that we are teaching, what is it in terms of the skills that we are imparting to our students, to the younger generation. Because if we are continuing to impart the skills which were good 4 decades ago, then we are not preparing our younger generations for the future. And that can be very, very problematic. As a region, if we have to become competitive, then our focus should be infrastructure in real terms, roads, airports, highways, information technology infrastructure, and of course, interdisciplinary learning as much as possible. The watertight compartment notions of disciplines as we knew several decades back are no longer valid. Today, there's a lot of commonalities between geography and the rest of the spatial science, between what geography can offer to sociologists, what geographers can offer to perhaps environmentalists broadly, and vice versa. So the previous notion, the traditional notion that we had about watertight compartment disciplines is now waning away. And we have to think about that too. In other words, we have to be ready to be flexible. We have to be ready to constantly evolve as new ideas are coming and as innovations are happening. And that, in fact, is the landmark feature of the evolving market economy. Capitalism, as we knew several decades back, is no longer existing in that shape or form. Today's capitalism and market economy, if you truly want to survive in this new market economy, you have to be ready to adapt and be flexible and change. In all of this, universities are not isolated stakeholders. Universities have to learn to play and to partner with those entities who are outside the university, whether it is a trade association, whether it is the Bihar Chamber of Commerce, whether it is the infrastructure, IT Infrastructure Association in Bihar, and similar other entities. And all of this, Dr. Sikka, let's move to the next one. I'm almost coming to an end. In all of this, this last slide gives you a sense that yes, we live in a riverine ecosystem, which has its own challenges, but we have to move forward, consider the idea of integrating ecosystem with knowledge economy so that new forms of livelihood with more value additions are created. I can imagine that my audience must be having a lot of questions, and I hope and I look forward to answering a lot of them. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Rajiv Thakur sir, for such an interesting presentation and your lecture. The theme is very relevant here, particularly for our students, the research scholars, as well as the faculty members of Mithila University. So now we can open the floor for discussion. Any questions, comments, any queries from the students, faculty members, scholars, please. Yes, Manohar. आप हिंदी में ही पूछ सकते हैं if you are comfortable, not comfortable in English, Manohar.
नहीं सर, इसे कुछ नहीं होगा, कुछ नहीं, सॉरी.
Senior teachers are. Sharda sir. Yes sir, please.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Rajiv ji. You have elaborated very nice example of Mithila region. My question is, you have elaborated about a knowledge-based economy, which is very good idea. But in Mithila region, there is no knowledge-based economy, I think. We are in present stage. We are trying for second stage, quaternary period. So please narrate it again and clarify it. I want to know from you.
Gee, I agree with you that you know, I mean, if I take you back to the pyramids that I was using to explain the idea of what happens in a typical developing society and what happens in a developed society, we in Mithila are highly dependent upon what is understood as the primary sector or resource-based livelihoods. Resource-based livelihoods have a limitation in terms of what they can allow you to create in terms of value. The value addition is very minimal. And that is why we talk about the creation of industries or factories. Factories require skills. We act upon the resources that is available in the primary sector and we create something new. And we sell them in the marketplace for a higher price. Very simple idea. But what is happening in that process is we are creating more value. It creates employment. It creates livelihood for many people. And of course, when you jump to the next scale, the tertiary sector, you create further more values, and more livelihoods are generated, more employment is generated. Now, when you know, two things which have happened. Even though the statistics is talking about 70% of Bihar's population is engaged in the service sector, I'm wondering what exactly is the kind of services are they engaged in? What kind of value addition do they have? I also notice from the real world experience that a sizable population of Bihar is also moving out of Bihar in search of livelihood, could be going to next door Calcutta, National Capital Region of Delhi, Mumbai, other cities, and of course outside the country also. In other words, my question is, how is Darbhanga's airport going to survive? Who are the people who fly through these airports? Who are the people who have the capabilities of paying 10,000 rupees for a return airfare from Delhi to Darbhanga and back? Is that the money, is that the financial resource that gets generated in Mithila's landscape, or is it money that is coming from outside? In other words, maybe your children are living in major metropolitan areas in the rest of the country and abroad, and it is because of their support that a lot of us are surviving in the rural landscape. And this is something to think about. I don't have statistics because no data has been collected. Somebody will have to collect and garner data from flow of population. Perhaps sitting at the Indira Gandhi International Airport in Delhi, at Patna Airport, at Darbhanga Airport, to find out what is this flow of population that we're talking about. But let me assure you that this is a sizable population that we are talking about. And a couple of other things which are important in all this is, yes, the ones who want to grow and develop, they are seeking value addition in terms of education, skill development outside Bihar, and sending their resources back, adding to the creation of more assets, purchase of land, creation of retail businesses, and so on and so forth. In my recent visit, one of the most interesting infrastructure development that I saw was the making of roads, highways. Of course, they are very, very pivotal as they connect places. Connection of places means transportation, accessibility. That means now raw materials can be brought and sold, or finished products can be brought and sold in far-flung rural areas. I was in places like Khaje D in Madhubani. I was in places like Phulparas. I was in other places like Supol, Simrahi Bazar area. And I'm wondering, how do these places survive? Where is the skill set? Where is the value addition happening? And how is this region going to continue forward? And what will be the overall comprehensive macroeconomics of all of this? And the only question and the only answer that comes to me is, until and unless as a society we understand the significance of value addition. And value addition is not just about learning and leaving the place. It means as you acquire those skill sets, you have to come back to invest. Because if the skill sets that residents from Bihar are acquiring, and if that skill set is benefiting somewhere in New York, or someone in Tokyo, or somebody in the rest of India, then you've lost your talent, you've lost your skill set. In other words, and this is where the government has a responsibility because of the wide amount of resources that they have. So it is through this webinar that I reach out, and I also would like to say that maybe, the governance in Patna, in Delhi, between Bihar Bhavan and between the Rajnivas in Patna, everybody has to think that if you truly want a real growth and a sustainable, integrated natural resource management growth linked with knowledge economy, then you have to create the skill sets, provide the infrastructure, and hope that you are rewarding those with the skill sets to stay home and to grow. I hope.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Very nice. Good. Go ahead, Sir.
Thank you, sir. Hi, Iftikhar. Yes, Iftikhar, go ahead.
Yes, sir. Sir, as you have explained well about the flood reason, sir. And my question to you about the Kosi reason, that why the Kosi always keep changing his way?
Good question. I'm sure that you are aware that by the time it is the month of July, August, September, Kosi gets flooded not just from the monsoon rain, but there is also something called climate change and the glacier melting which happens in the Himalayas, which is the source of River Kosi. So the flooding that you experience, the waterlogging that you experience, whether it is in Kosi, and why only Kosi? Kamla Balan, Mahananda, Gandak, Bagmati, Ghagra, all of them, all the rivers that are coming from the Himalayan mountains. They all are receiving twin supplies of water. Excessive monsoon rains, on which we have no control, and of course the melting of the glacier. Both are contributing to the heavy flooding. And we only can adapt. How much are you going to do in terms of mitigation? How many sandbags are you going to put around the rivers and try to create more embankments? But it doesn't mean that we do not continue to try mitigation ways too. But we have to think about other aspects of how, as a population, how, as a demographic, we are contributing to the process of climate change also. We often think that climate change is something happening in another part of the world. It's not happening within us and among us, while in reality it is. It's taking place very much within us also. And so ideas such as carbon emission is something that we have to think about. And this is where the next step of knowledge economy, which is creation of a green economy. Each one of us who are concerned about Mithila's landscape also have to be concerned about that whatever you invest in, whatever you are trying to do to bring about value in society, in the economy, has to be based on the idea of sustainability. And of course, you cannot think about sustainability unless you think about integrating resources with the idea of sustainability. Hope that answers the question.
Thank you, sir.
Very nice. Thank you so much, sir, for answering the queries. And it is very pertinent that how we have to integrate our natural resources with the livelihood opportunities, and how to generate that a knowledge economy in this region, particularly in these times, the challenging times of pandemic. And you have also stated the role of university. You have a question. You have a question. Rajiv sir, there is a question by my colleague Manuraj Sharma sir in the chat box.
And I can read the question. I think the question is saying, there are two of them. I'll read the top one. Disaster like floods devalues every aspect of life, economy, and governance in Mithila. How do you see developing of knowledge economy, livelihood in a place that remains submerged underwater for 3 to 4 months every year? That's a very good question. And Dr. Sharma, I will answer that. The other question that Dr. Manuraj Sharma poses is, how as floating communities will we be able to develop knowledge economy in Mithila? And it's a very pertinent question, Dr. Manuraj Sharma, that if the landscape is submerged for 3 to 4 months underwater, and that is why I'm not talking about moving forward, trying to be dependent on resource-based. And of course, some dependence on resource will always be there. And we can't give up on agriculture. We have to do it as the ecosystem allows us. Of course, there are many, many adaptive management strategies that can be employed over there too. But as far as the rest of the demographics is concerned, the only way for an underdeveloped area or the Mithila landscape, which is challenged by multiple factors, multiple ways in which landscape gets challenged, and so it's difficult to perhaps set up an industry, because there's a reason why historically industries have not survived. There used to be sugar mills, and there used to be other industries, paper mills also in the area. If you go towards the eastern part of North Bihar, there were jute mills also. But slowly, gradually, they have not managed to survive the onslaught of the challenges of changing economy. But this is where knowledge economy plays a role, because it demands a certain level of flexibility. And its dependence is more on what is called knowledge infrastructure or digital infrastructure. I can give you examples of people that I know in North Bihar Plain, young people like Dr. Sikka, like Dr. Manuraj Sharma, and many others, who are in the area of information technology, there are software consultants surviving and working out of Samastipur, out of Darbhanga, who have direct clients in US. And they're living there, they're working. They're perhaps making nearly equivalent to what their counterparts are making in US. But then they have the purchasing ability, which is far higher than their counterparts in Samastipur or in Darbhanga. How is that happening? Some of these people have studied in IT institutes in the rest of India, but they have chosen to stay back there. One of the biggest advantage of information technology is that if you have this skill set, this very evolving skill set, you make yourself extremely flexible when it comes to landscape. You can be located anywhere as long as you have internet connection, broadband connection, and that's the infrastructure that the government has to facilitate. Since broadband is not something which you can expect an individual to put forward, but it requires a lot of resources which only governments can afford. So yes, floating communities, 3 to 4 months, and related issues are there, but the solution lies in a green economy. The solution lies in a knowledge-based economy, and of course, infrastructure, IT infrastructure will play a very important role. Dr. Manraj Sharma, I wonder if you're satisfied.
Thank you, sir.
Manu sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you for answering this question. Yeah, thank you.
So thank you, sir, for your wonderful presentation and answering all the queries of our students, research scholars, and faculty members. Very pertinently, you have mentioned that how we can integrate our natural resource system and generate livelihood, particularly in these challenging times of pandemic. After this pandemic, the entire job market is shrinking, and there is a requirement of new skill sets. So this is also a clarion call for all our students and research scholars, that how one skill cannot lead you anywhere, and it is a time for multi-skill development. And I would also like to inform that in this context, when you said that universities play a very pivotal role in such knowledge economies, under the able leadership of our Pro Vice Chancellor Madam and our respected HOD Sir, our department is going to initiate some new skill-based courses like land surveying is on anvil, and then another course in disaster management. So these are the very relevant and local need-based courses which are able, which will be able to develop the new skills among our students and can open a new avenues for them in this job market. So with this, on the behalf of the Department of Geography, Lalit Narayan Mithila University, Darbhanga, I am grateful towards Professor Rajiv Thakur sir, who has spared his valuable time and delivered this keynote lecture at this international webinar. We are very thankful to you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rajiv. Thank you very much. Nice presentation. Very nice.
So, taking the program further, now we have invited lectures. We have 2 young geographers who will be delivering today's invited lecture. The first lecture will be by Dr. Olga Lapina. She is a young scholar from Russian Geographical Society. She is the International Affairs Coordinator. But unfortunately, we have just received message from her side that she is not unwell and will not be able to join this webinar. And therefore, we take the program further. And now I would like to request Dr. Hossam Ismael, my friend from Egypt. Hossam, are you there? Hossam, are you there? Yes. So on the behalf of the Department of Geography, Mithila University, Darbhanga, Bihar, India, I heartily welcome you to this international webinar. Dr. Hossam Ismael is the lecturer at Department of Geography, New Valley University, Egypt. He is also holding the administrative position of Vice Dean for post-studies and research, Faculty of Arts at New Valley University, Egypt. His research fields are applied climate and remote sensing. Hossam and I have been in regular touch at the International Geographical Union conferences at Moscow, Beijing, and we have been working a lot together. And his title of today's lecture is The Climate and Its Impacts on COVID-19 Morbidity in Arid Regions, Egypt as the Case Study. I welcome you, Hossam. Over to you.
Thanks a lot for giving me this opportunity to participate with you. I would like to thank all the organizing committee for the most wonderful simulating conference. It's fruitful and amazing for me. As you all very well known, that the COVID-19 pandemic diseases affects us all, and they gets the world into the huge crisis. And the temperature is an important factor affected, has a great impact on the spreading of this disease. But before I start my presentation, I would like to say something. I'm a strong believer that the initial hypothesis was induced, assuming the COVID-19 outbreak might weaken and fully stop in response in higher temperature observations. It might be weakened in the higher temperature, especially in the summer and spring. Two things must be taken into account. The current study relied calculating the effect of the heat wave after incubation period. Incubation period of the virus, it's account by maybe 8 or 14 days. The second thing is there are a topographic and demographic and the climatic difference between huge in India and Egypt. The most important these difference that Egypt located in the northern hemisphere. I can share my presentation if it's allowed.
Yes, Hossam, it's allowed. You can share your screen.
So the studies depended on many types of data, such as meteorological data. It was observed from the Egyptian Meteorological Authority, unofficial data in Egypt covered many regions in Egypt. And also we have synoptic analysis of heat waves. We obtained a synoptic weather data from the ECMWF. It's a climatic site. We took the data from there. And we have COVID-19 data. The situation of the COVID-19 morbidity in Egypt was assessed based on the official global of WHO available. It's available. Taking our in our consideration the lake time or incubation period, what I told you before, according to many sources. Such as American College of Cardiology, 2020, they said that the COVID-19 the period can be very greatly, and it's on average of 5 to 7.8 days. However, it can be up to 14 days. So the heat wave in the period unusually hot weather or prolonged abnormally high temperature relative to those expected. The table number 2 illustrates or reviews basic heat wave properties derived from most popular available in some lectures. Some studies present only qualitative description and not most of these studies is calculative. Didn't put some statistical methodological in the determine the heat wave period. Regarding the current study, we adopted a statistical recognition of heat waves from daily maximum temperature record, which was derived from the determination provided by both WHO and AMS. The heat wave is any spell of least 1 days in which daily maximum temperature over than 5 Celsius. The research objectives is detecting and analyzes the most recent spring heat waves struck Egypt or over Egypt in the middle of May 2020, and synoptic conditions contribute to generate it. The objective number, yeah.
Dr. Hossam, sorry for interruption. Your slides are not moving. Please move your slides as well.
Okay.
Hossam, please move your slides as well.
Okay, I will show the research objectives. After that, I will present my results and findings. The objective number 2, discussing and progressing the present situation of the COVID-19 morbidity, and the objective number 3, examining of extreme temperature according to COVID-19 outbreak. Okay. Moving to my results and discussion. As I told you before, the heat wave days were extracted, and the heat wave instances were calculated based on comparing the daily average of maximum temperature to the reference record of 3 years normals of maximum temperature. And this table, as shown in table 3, that the heat wave occurs was most pronounced in Nile Delta, Cairo, Middle Nile, and the Middle Nile Valley and Western Desert, where heat waves event proceeded for 5 to 6 sequent day and thermal intensities, where the strongest amount 7 to 8.4. On the other hand, the heat wave was less powerful in North Coast, and the heat wave may be attributed to a maritime effect of Red Sea and in the mountains and Sinai and some regions. As you can see in the synoptic chart of surface wind, the synoptic map suggests that the heat wave arose from the extensions of Asian depression to the west, where the extremely hot air mass covering Iraq and eastern Syria extend to the eastern Mediterranean basin and Egypt. This Indian monsoons low a huge thermal depression that affects the three countries, the Asian, Africa, and Europe. This depression begins to from the India and surface in April and end in the September. The figure number 5, the graph indicates that there has been a
Hossam, your slides are not moving. Hossam, your slides are not moving actually.
What?
Please move your slide as well. Your only first slide is visible to us.
Yeah,
please move your PPT.
Yes, I moved it already. Again, please.
Can you share it again, because only first slide is visible to us. First slide.
Okay, I will
of
share
your
it again.
PPT.
I will.
Yes.
Okay, I will share it again.
Yes, now it's visible.
Okay.
What you can do, you can just click on them. What you are doing, you follow it. Yes.
You can see it.
Continue with this. Yes, now I can see
Okay.
results and discussion.
Okay.
Yes, now this
Okay.
is visible. The graphs are visible. Yes, continue, please.
Yeah, okay. Okay. I explained this this figure and this table. Explained it already also, and this synoptic chart I talked about it. Here I'm the graph number 5. It's a graph indicate there that there has been a steady increase in infection count recorded. The trend of emphasize these facts where general upward of COVID-19 outbreak can be notably observed. As point out of chart, development of daily infection achieved its main peak on the 31 May when 1,536 confirmed cases were detected after continuous rise of morbidity. Immediately after an abrupt decline of COVID-19 infection, numbers of the distinguished, and the main drop occurs with the only about 1,000 cases in the 3rd of June. My comment in the figure number 6, logically, the virus incubation period is 14 days, according to WHO reports. And a lot of newly published research. This means that the effect of the heat wave will be monitored within 14 days after the end of it. So, when we give the 14 days incubation period for becoming effect of the COVID-19 to the lag time, we put the lag time in our consideration as it shown in this figure number 6. We found an outstanding relationship between the thermal intensities during heat waves and the delayed COVID-19 new cases detected. The confirmed cases reduced from 330% of the all confirmed cases. The last figure, it's second the order polynomial regression model of the relationship. It's also it's between the confirmed cases and the heat wave intensity. The chart reveals that positive thermal intensity 5.5 Celsius. Data pointed in the blue color has no effect on the COVID-19 morbidity and spreading, since there in increase in confirmed cases despite positive thermal intensity increase as well. When positive thermal intensity 5.5, the increase for above 4, the 5.5 morbidity will begin to reduce. So the main findings, the main results of our research, we can say that the critical thermal threshold as which COVID-19 morbidity declines in 5.5 Celsius over the mean. Moreover, the forward projection of that association proposed the thermal intensity of 10.7 Celsius as a critical thermal threshold at which COVID-19 morbidity may pose. The figures show that if we can see this point, it's referred to the increase in temperature in 5.5 over the main. You can see this circle. It's red circles. The circles here say the confirmed cases. You can see after increasing in 5.5, the confirmed cases reduced. You can see there, reduced. If the temperature increased here, it's 10.7. We cannot see any confirmed cases. So increase for over 5.5, the confirmed cases will be reduced. In the projected trend, if the temperature over the 10.7 Celsius, the confirmed cases will be stopped, or the morbidity of COVID-19 may pose. Thanks a lot for your kind attention. Thanks again. Your has been a great success in all possible respects. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Professor Secker. Thanks.
Thank you, Hossam, for giving us a very interesting presentation and explaining the impact of COVID-19 on morbidity in an arid region. Actually, this Mithila region from where this university is located in India, it's geographically very different. So our students must have enjoyed your presentation, and we start a validity session.
I can give you the total figure what has happened in the Darbhanga. That is total sampling, testing sampling has been done is 1 lakh 8. That is the up to date. Total positive is 10,000, of which 9,562 has recovered, and total negative 10,56,420. From the start of the coronavirus, there was no cases recorded in Darbhanga up to April, May. The first case was started in Darbhanga in May, and then after it slowly got it, and we got only social distancing. First, we could keep the patient in home isolation, and so was done by the local Assam. Symptoms were there, treatment was given. There was only symptomatic treatment, that is, if the fever was there, paracetamol was, erythromycin was given, vitamin C, vitamin D, we was given to elevate the immunity of it.
Professor KKL Das, sir. Shubh Kumar Sahu, sir, if you would like to speak something. Shubh Kumar Sahu, sir. So, coming to the end of this program, Shubh Kumar sir कुछ कह रहे हैं? Yes, Shubh Kumar sir, आप.
Congratulations for this webinar from the Geography Department and participants. Thank you for a beneficial COVID-19 webinar. Thanking you. Congratulations again.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Now, proceeding further to the end of this program, now I would like to request Dr. Anvanjan sir, Associate Professor in Department of Geography, LN Mithila University, Darbhanga, to propose a vote of thanks.
Good afternoon, everyone. I, Dr. Anvanjan, Associate Professor in this department. And it's my pleasure, privilege, and honor to give the vote of thanks today on this occasion of the intellectual exercise in way of international webinar on such an important issue of contemporary importance. We, Geographers family, are truly blessed to have such wonderful day today as we have assembled through this international webinar. It's a great day and proud moment for our University Department of Geography, Mithila University, to in organizing such mega event at very short notice. This global coronavirus pandemic has given this opportunity of interaction and deliberation with our international intellectuals. On behalf of organizing committee, first I would like to express my sincere gratitude and regards to our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Sir Professor Surendra Pratap Singh, who took keen interest, blessed, and supported us in organizing this international webinar. Now, I earnestly express my heartfelt gratitude and appreciation to our Honorable Pro Vice Chancellor, Ma'am Professor Dolly Sinha, for guiding us for this international webinar. She has always supported and encouraged our departmental activities, and including this international webinar. So a special thanks to her for unconditional support and affection, encouragement to our department. Dean Social Science, Professor Gopi Raman Prasad Singh, is also very instrumental, and we are very thankful to him. Professor Mustaq Ahmed, though he has not joined today, but we are thankful to him also for all administrative support. Now, today's esteemed guest speaker, as we listen, Professor Rosie Cox, Dr. Rajiv Thakur, Dr. Olga Lapina, though she also not joined today due to some ill health, and Dr. Hossam Ismael from Egypt. We are thankful to them because they give a very valuable lectures and all of we get benefited from their discourse. But especially I extend my heartfelt thanks to Professor Rajiv Thakur for his special keynote address and joined this seminar for a long time, long duration. And as our friend, colleague Gaurav has said, he is really the pride of Mithila, and he saw his pain. That's why he was joined this international webinar from very beginning till end. So we are thankful to him for all encouragement, all supports he has given us in this international webinar. We are also thankful to Dr. Sanjeev Kumar Sinha, Civil Surgeon, Darbhanga. He has highlighted the present ongoing vaccination drive and many things. So we are also very thankful to him. We are also thankful to all senior faculty members who have joined today this international webinar, especially Professor Kekel Das, Professor Dhaneshwar Prasad Singh, Dr. Shardanand Chaudhary, and all senior faculties from different constituent colleges, and all research scholars and my students who have made this occasion, made this international webinar successful. And lastly, I also thankful to our head of department who has energized all of us, and very in good way, he supported all of us for the successful of this international webinar. And I am also thankful to the media who is covering this international webinar since we have decided to this international webinar. At last, I want to say a big thank to everyone, national and international participants who took time out of their busy schedule to participate in this international webinar. So thank you very much. Thank you. Now this webinar is to be end. Thank you. बोल दिया, end हो गया, end है, चलिए।